In the last section, we finished some Firebase setup. We're not going to come back to Firebase for a little bit. Instead, we're going to focus on putting together our sign-in form with some really good styling for now. And then we'll come back to Firebase and actually wrap up the authentication piece. So one of the first considerations that we need to make for this sign-up form is whether or not we should create a new component to house the form itself, or whether or not we should just place the form directly inside this app component. So I'm talking about like literally placing a text input tag directly inside this component. I'm going to suggest that we create a separate component, and here's why. The sign-in form should only be visible for a portion of the time inside our app. Sometimes we'll show the form, right? Like when the user first starts the app up, but other times we won't. So when a user successfully signs in. And it's going to be easier to hide it if we put the form into a separate component. So with that in mind, I'm going to create a new file inside of my components directory, not inside of common, just inside of components, called login form. So login form, its sole purpose is going to be to house everything having to do with entering an email, entering a password, and then trying to sign the user in. So inside this file, let's get started with a little bit of boilerplate. I am going to make this a class-based component for reasons that we'll talk about in just a little bit. So we'll import React and component from React, and then just Vue for right now from React Native. Then we'll create our component class of login form. I'm going to make sure I've got component spelt correctly, and add my render method from which we'll return a single view tag for right now. Then at the bottom, we can export default login form. Okay, so there's the boilerplate right now. I'm hoping that at some point in time, getting this boilerplate together is going to become second nature, because if it feels like we write it a lot, yep, that's absolutely correct. We definitely write this thing a lot, this boilerplate out. All right, as a quick reminder, this login form, here's a diagram for it. We need to have that kind of card, the card section component, and definitely the button component as well. So I think that our next step will be to place our reusable components, or at least import them, and then kind of scaffold out what we want the login form to look like. We're going to need one card, and I think it's going to contain 3 card sections. One for email, one for password, and one for the login button. So let's get started with that now. At the very top, we will import our button, card, and card section from the common directory. And notice that I'm saying in the current directory, find the common folder, because this login form is already inside the components directory. Notice how this is a lot nicer import statement than if we had 3 separate import statements all coming from the common folder. So again, I really like this kind of pattern here, this kind of approach. Now we'll add just kind of a little bit of scaffolding of what the different cards and card section areas should be. So I'm going to take out the view tag for right now, and I'll replace it with a card tag. So that's going to give us that kind of nice looking wrapper that has some nice shadow on it, has some margin on the left and right hand sides, just something that looks nice. And inside of here, we'll make our 3 separate card sections. So card section 1, and for right now I'm just going to use self-closing tags because I don't have anything to put inside the first 2 just yet. And then for the last one, this is going to be the card section that's going to house the button. And we could probably create that button right now, because we already know what text it's going to require. So I'm just going to put in login, like so. So we've got card, 3 card sections, and the last card section has a button tag inside of it. Finally, we need to make sure that this component actually gets shown inside of our app. So I'm going to flip back to our app component, import this form, and show it. So up at the top, we will import login form from components login form, like so. And then we're going to show it inside of our application. So I've got my view tag, I've got my header tag. I probably don't need the text anymore. It was really just there to get us started. So I'm going to take out the text tag and replace it with an instance of the login form like so. All right. Now, of course, as I mentioned earlier, we probably don't want to show the login form 100% of the time, but we will just use this shortcut for now, and we'll come back later and figure out how we're going to toggle whether or not the login form is visible. Okay, time to see if everything worked out. I'm going to flip back over to simulator, refresh, and see how we're doing. The first time we import stuff always takes a while for it to transpile, especially since my laptop is not the newest one in the world. So we'll just I'm never giving up. I'm just gonna let the thing go. While that is running though, I do need to do a little bit of cleanup. I've still got the unused text tag, which we just deleted. So I'm just gonna take that out just for good housekeeping. And there we go. All right, so much better. I've got one card section, two card section, and the third one here. And the third one presently just houses the login button, which if we press doesn't do anything just yet. So let's continue the next section and figure out exactly what we're going to place inside of these card sections.